Hi guys, and welcome back. In this video, we will be doing a deep dive into the Nepal earthquakes case study. There are three earthquakes that you need to know about for the unit on tectonic hazards. The Nepal earthquakes of 2015, the Japanese earthquake and tsunami of 2011, and the Haiti earthquake of 2010. It's essential for you to know these case studies well, especially for the longer exam questions that require case study knowledge. We will start with the Nepal earthquakes, followed by the Japanese and Haiti earthquakes in two other videos. These can be found in the case study playlist and in the description below. Feel free to send me any questions that you may have regarding these case studies in the comments section below. Okay, let's get started. What caused the earthquakes in Nepal in 2015? Nepal lies on a collision plate boundary between the Indian and the Eurasian plates. Now we know that a collision plate boundary is where you have two continental plates moving towards each other or colliding. This is actually a convergent collision plate boundary where two plates are converging, they are moving towards each other, and both of them in this case are continental crust. So you have the Indian plate on one side here, and you have the Eurasian plate here. And we know that when we have two continental plates pushing towards each other, you have the formation of fold mountains. And that is what has actually caused the Himalayas to form here. Okay, so the Himalayas, because the pushing keeps on going on, the Himalayas are getting higher and higher over time. Now, of course, the movement is very negligible in terms of the height above sea level, but it takes place over a long period of time. So the continent, well, this Indian plate here pushed against the Eurasian plate, and as that happens, or normally pushes the Eurasian plate, and as that happens, it actually pushes this Eurasian plate upwards, forming, which is what is forming the Alps here. And this collision creates immense pressure and stress along the fault line that we can see here in the Himalayas. So that's your fault line there, and a lot of pressure and stress will build up here over time. Now in 2015, the pressure had built up and was released suddenly, sending seismic waves to the surface. Now the focus of the earthquake was very shallow. At only 6 kilometers deep, it led to an 8.1 magnitude earthquake on the 25th of April 2015, followed 17 days later by a 7.3 magnitude earthquake. That obviously is on the Richter scale on the 12th of May. Now, talking about its focus, so the focus is the point below the ground where the rock gives way. Now, if that is deeper, is further down, is down into the into the interior of the Earth, then the seismic waves will not be as powerful when they reach the surface, because they are traveling, in circles or in a circular motion, spreading outwards and coming towards the surface. So if that focus is not deep, then they will arrive on the surface with a lot of power. But if it's deeper, if the focus is deeper below the ground, then it means that by the time they get to the surface where the epicenter is going to be, then they are not going to be as powerful. So this very shallow earthquake actually, the shallow depth of the focus rather made this earthquake quite powerful. So what makes Nepal so vulnerable? So vulnerable means more likely to experience negative impacts when exposed to hazards. It's having a reduced capacity to predict, prepare, and protect against hazards. And we are going to be looking at 4 reasons why Nepal is vulnerable. And we are going to discuss each of them as we go along, because these can be useful for answering 4 and 8 mark questions. And the first reason why Nepal is vulnerable is its poverty. Now, Nepal's average income is $2 a day. And that means that 20% of the population is living below the poverty line. Now, that's quite a significant number of people because it's 1/5 of the population. 1 out of every 5 people in Nepal is living below the poverty line. Now, that has implications both at a national level and at an individual level, because if people are not earning a lot of income, then it means that the country cannot generate enough revenue for its GDP. So the country as a whole is poor. And that means that in terms of preparing for earthquakes, so predicting, preparing, and protecting against earthquakes, the government does not necessarily have enough money to do that effectively. So that affects, that makes them a lot more vulnerable to earthquakes. And then at an individual level, people are not able to live in homes that are constructed, in a way that prevents them from collapsing if an earthquake was to take place. So again, that is a vulnerability both at the national level and at the individual level. Then we have poor quality buildings. So this point here obviously is linked to the poverty here. And the buildings are not made to withstand earthquakes, and building codes, are also not necessarily followed. Now, whether that's as a result of corruption or unavailability of funds is something that can be discussed, okay, or something can be debated. And densely populated areas, therefore, like Kathmandu, which is not too far away from where this, which is the area that was most impacted by these two earthquakes, are very densely populated and are likely to experience a lot of damage. Because if they are densely populated as well, it means that there are many houses that are not very earthquake ready, so to speak, within a small, within small areas, right? So it's densely populated. A lot of buildings in not such a big area. So when the buildings collapse, then they are likely to cause a lot of, not just damage, but are likely to impact people as well. Okay, so that's for poor buildings. Now, if we go on to topography and relief, now topography or relief refers to the height of the land, and we have discussed at the start that the Himalayas are around this particular area, and then that means then that the mountainous terrain makes the area prone to landslides and avalanches that are triggered by earthquakes. Now, when there is earth movement, and especially such a big earthquake like this one, which was 8.1, on the 8.1 magnitude on the Richter scale, then it means that the land around these mountains can be made a lot loose because of the shaking, and you end up with landslides. So the landsliding, and especially if there has been rainfall, you're going to have landslides. And then in terms of the snow at the peaks of these mountains, that could trigger avalanches where the snow is made a lot looser and then begins to cascade down the mountains. So that's another hazard that is experienced as a result of the topography. So this is a physical factor, not a human factor. This is a physical factor that makes Nepal vulnerable. Now, on top of that, the areas that are mountainous are also quite remote. And as you can imagine, they are quite inaccessible as well, because building roads there and infrastructure is very difficult due to the mountainous terrain. And if you have people living in those areas and they are impacted by, say, those landslides or avalanches, then it means that reaching them is going to be very difficult. So that again exposes them or causes them to be vulnerable to earthquake hazards. Okay, then the last one is that there are seismic gaps in this area. Now, seismic gaps are areas that have not experienced significant rupture for centuries. So rupture here is referring to the thrust or the stress that is released out of, or the burst that is released out of an earthquake. So if it has not experienced a rupture for centuries, it then means that pressure has been building up for a long time. Now, these seismic gaps have been identified in central and eastern Nepal, and they have the potential for devastating earthquakes with magnitudes of 8 on the Richter scale or higher, potentially impacting densely populated areas, including Kathmandu in the future. So these here are 4 different reasons why Nepal is vulnerable. So 2 of them are human reasons, and then 2 of them are physical reasons. And then here we have an exemplar exam style question, and it's an 8-mark question, and it says to assess the reasons why some countries are more vulnerable to tectonic hazards. So these here can actually be used quite well to answer this particular question here. I'm going to leave you to think about that question, and we will be answering these questions in a separate video so that we can complete this case study. Okay. What were the impacts of the Nepal earthquakes? So I've categorized them here under social impacts and economic impacts. So we'll start with the social impacts. And unfortunately, there were 9,000 people that died in this earthquake. Now, when discussing this in an 8-mark question, you could talk about the fact that these deaths and the injuries that we'll talk about are likely to have been as a result of the poor buildings and infrastructure in the country. And that would mean that those buildings were not strong enough to withstand earthquakes and therefore collapse, because we know that it is collapsing buildings that causes deaths in an earthquake and injuries as well for that matter. Now, if we move on to the injuries, there were 23,000 injuries. Now, this was also exacerbated by damage to 1,000 healthcare centers. So the healthcare centers as well are likely not to have been built to withstand earthquakes either, and therefore they collapsed. So meaning that people now could not be treated in the healthcare centers that were available before the earthquake. Now, that then implies that a country like Nepal would have to rely on other countries and other agencies or organizations to come in or step in to help them. So these are points that you could discuss at length in an 8-mark question. Then over 8 million people, a third of Nepal's population were affected in different ways, such as an increase in inequality and a decline in the quality of life. Now, as you can imagine, the population is already poor. So they then lose the little that they had, which then means that they are even poorer. So the population was affected greatly, or a large proportion of the Nepal's population was affected greatly by these 2 earthquakes. Then homelessness was another problem, as 600,000 homes were destroyed and 285,000 partially damaged. So this then led to makeshift shelters that lacked basic services. Now, if we are talking about a lack of basic services and people are living in makeshift shelters, then it means that services such as piped water, okay, sanitation, and so on, like sanitation drains, which we shall talk about here, are not available. And because of that, there will be a lack of hygiene. And because there is a lack of hygiene, it means that people are likely to become unwell. They are likely to get sick. So that then creates an even bigger problem, because like we said before or previously, that 1,000 healthcare centers had been damaged. So these people, we then have more people that are now unwell because of living in makeshift shelters and where they are living in very crowded conditions, and they do not have access to basic services and have become sick now, and they cannot be attended to at these healthcare centers. So it's just, again, exacerbates the problem. Then we have water supply systems that were destroyed and sanitation drains as well damaged. So this here again also led to health risks, which then also puts a strain on any healthcare system or centers that have been left and damaged in the earthquake. Okay, then moving on to the economic impacts, we have the cost of reconstruction here, and this was estimated at 7 billion US dollars, which was 35% of Nepal's GDP. So over a third of Nepal's GDP is what it costs to reconstruct, for the reconstruction process. Now, again, if you're discussing this, you can look at it from various angles. You can talk about the fact that that reconstruction process required outside help, so international donors may have come into play here. Nepal may have had to borrow money in order to help with the reconstruction process. Okay, if they are borrowing money and they are already a poor country, then that puts them in a cycle of debt. So there's a lot here that you could talk about or discuss in an 8-mark question. Okay, then moving on to the next economic impact, and that was that at the capital, Kathmandu, the airport was shut down. Now, this affected the tourism industry, businesses, and relief efforts. Now, tourists obviously are going to arrive in Nepal via the airport. So if they are not arriving because the airport has been destroyed or part of it has been shut, well, the airport has been shut down, then that is a loss of revenue for the government. It's a loss of income for people who work in the tourism industry as well. So that is a loss of money again. Then you have businesses as well. So businesses that rely on the airport are also losing money. Relief efforts. So any international help that is supposed to come in, right? People coming in by plane to help. So medical personnel, for example, if food is being sent to help these people, if you have medical medicines and other, medical, stuff that is coming into the country. Sorry to use that word. It's really general, but, anything that is coming into the country for the relief efforts to take place, then that is not it's likely to be impacted by the fact that the airport is shut down. Then lastly, last economic impact, it was on farming. And the earthquake killed many farm animals and caused significant damage to crops. The planting and harvesting seasons were also disrupted, and this impacted farmers' incomes. So you can see that there was, great economic impact as a result of this earthquake. Or well, these earthquakes, because it was 2 of them. All right, so moving on to the exam style questions. The first one here is a 4-mark question, and it's asking you to describe one social and one economic impact of tectonic hazards. So you can pick one from either side here and talk about it. Then assess the importance, this is the 8-mark question, of social and primary impacts of either earthquakes or volcanoes in an emerging country. So in this case here, because we are talking about earthquakes, then you could use information here to talk about earthquakes in this 8-mark question. Okay, so we'll move on. As I said previously, we'll answer these questions in a separate video so that we can complete the case study. What was the response to the earthquakes of 2015 in Nepal? So Nepal, being a very poor country, did not have the money nor the resources or equipment to deal with the devastation caused by the earthquake. The Nepalese government therefore appealed for international help. Okay, so as you can see here, this is a news article that is talking about the world going to the rescue of Nepal after these earthquakes. So we have different groups of people or organizations and countries as well that went in to help Nepal deal with or to respond to these earthquakes. And the first one here we are going to talk about is the United Nations. So the UN set up an appeal for Nepal, and they raised over $330 million in 2 weeks. So this was used for health services, temporary shelters, and supplies like food, water, medical kits, and blankets. Okay, then the next organization here that stepped in to help was Oxfam, and Oxfam provided water, sanitation, and hygiene. So WASH, which is water, sanitation, and hygiene, and they also helped with healthcare and the reconstruction process. Now, we did talk about some of the impacts that the social and economic impacts, and we said that one of them was a threat of disease, especially due to poor sanitation. So you can see that Oxfam actually did a good job by providing clean water instead of people having to rely on, dirty water. And then they also provided sanitation. So this would have helped, obviously, to reduce on any threat of an epidemic or diseases spreading through the population quickly. Then we have India, which is a neighboring country, and India sent troops to assist in search and rescue operations in densely populated areas like Kathmandu. The UK also provided specialist responders and dogs to help. Now you can imagine, obviously, they were trying to find people that maybe have been, may still have been under the rubble and still alive. So this rescue operation, search and rescue operation, was obviously very important, and India and the UK played a big role in that. Then we also have two other countries that helped, and that was the USA and China. So these two countries here provided search and rescue helicopters to access isolated mountain areas. Now, you remember earlier in the video, we had talked about the fact that in those mountainous areas, there were likely to be landslides and avalanches caused by the earthquake or triggered by the earthquake. So such remote areas are difficult to reach by road, and therefore it was important to have these search and rescue helicopters to access those isolated areas and to reach those people. Okay, so there are some criticisms of the response here that I have put down, because these again can also be used in an 8-mark question when you are debating your points. And the first one is that there was poor community level leadership and engagement. So this is on the part of the Nepalese government and the Nepalese, the Nepalese government. So community leadership, obviously at the community level, they were poorly organized, and then they were not as engaged in the process of trying to get the situation resolved, so to speak. Then there was insufficiency, emergency preparedness, and weak healthcare systems. Now, as it is, we did say that at 1,000 healthcare centers were damaged. So having a weak healthcare system and you have 1,000 of your healthcare centers damaged, then means that that degrades the healthcare system even further. And for you then to deal with 23,000 injuries that we had talked about in the previous slide, then that becomes a huge strain on the healthcare system. Okay, then we are also talking about another criticism here, that there was a lot of red tape. So red tape and bureaucracy led to delays in government-funded rebuilding efforts. So that means that before decisions can be made, so red tape and the bureaucracy, that's what it refers to, led to delays. The politicians and the people in authority taking time to make decisions, and that obviously was not great in terms of getting people back on their feet, getting them rehoused, and so on. Then we also have poor coordination amongst the international donors. Now, this here obviously has to do with the people that came in to help. Okay, and that these here are criticisms that can be used, especially the first three here, because they show that LICs are not necessarily very good. They're not necessarily very good at responding to hazards such as earthquakes, and this would be a good example in terms of having points to to talk about and to discuss. All right, let's move on to the exemplar exam question here. So this one here is an 8 marker, and it talks about evaluating the effectiveness of the management of a volcano or earthquake hazard in either a named emerging or developing country. So the developing country here you'd be talking about is Nepal, and you'd be talking about the 2 earthquakes that took place here, and you'd be using these points to talk about whether you think it was effective or not. Okay. All right. So yeah, that concludes it for this particular slide. That brings us to the end of this video on the Nepal earthquakes case study. I hope that you have found it useful. I will also do a follow-up video answering the exam questions that were in this video, so look out for that. The Haiti earthquake and Japanese earthquake and tsunami videos will also be uploaded shortly. They will be available in the description below, as well as the case study playlist. Feel free to send me any questions regarding the case studies in the comment section below. All the best, and see you again soon. Bye-bye.